He's always struck me as a very quiet and introverted type of person.
I like when an artist says his studio is too small. Most people do say that, but it's because his is full of work.
We would stay up to 3 in the morning talking about great art ideas, getting a cat boat, sailing around in the Caribbean or the Bahamas with this cat boat, making a living while we painted.
He absorbed life, and then he translated it on his canvases, and so magical.
And I'd be painting away really tightly, and he'd come and push my elbow so my paintbrush would go shoop, and then my whole project was messed up, and he'd go, I just want to keep your priorities straight.
I grew up basically poor. I didn't know it at the time because everybody else was. I grew up in an area which was tenements, 3-story buildings, 1 flat on each floor. Houses were 3 feet apart, and it was an unusual neighborhood in the sense that it was all made up of children who were 2nd or 3rd generation ethnic varieties. We had everything in our neighborhood: the Polish, the Germans, the Irish, the Jewish, every Czechoslovakian, every different kind of nationality that you could think of was where I went to school with the children and up through high school. And that's where I learned a lot of swear words from grandfathers who used to curse at the kids when they hung out on the street corner, or they were sitting on the porches. Porches were a big thing in those days. It was everybody would come out in the afternoon, sit on the porch, talk a lot about the neighborhood, what was going on in politics and all that, but you pick up all the words that you weren't supposed to say. 96 Hopkins Place is this house right here. Is where I grew up. Went to grammar school and high school out of this house. What amazes me is the color of the house is still the same as it was when I grew up. They haven't changed it.
The same color?
Same color. The only thing is they had a hedge instead of the fence there. That's the only thing that changed. The trees, everything is exactly the same. My mother would make us a tent made out of an old sheet. I don't know, that was something else to play in. We had made a boat with 3 crates, fruit crates, 2 of which were just left on the grass by themselves, and one of them we nailed together to a point to make the bow of the boat. Put a little flag on the front of the boat, and we used to sit in there and make believe we were sailing across the sea or something like that. I mean, we were sitting on the grass because it didn't even have a bottom to the thing. My father used to stand in the doorway and just say, "Get in the house." And I knew what he was going to do. And it's like the hardest thing I ever had to do was to walk through that doorway, because every time he'd tell me to get in the house because I was late or something was wrong, I'd get to the doorway and he just whacked me on the back of the head. That's the kind of attitude he had about everything. I was just like an annoyance. I had a brother who was 3 years younger than I was, and he had gotten a cyst on his eye when he was 22 months old. My mother treated it, and evidently it had streptococcus germ in the cyst. Got into his eye, and he went blind in the one eye. So consequently, he had a hard time because, 22 months old, you're a baby. And he had lost the sight of the one eye, but it had deteriorated over the years. And they used to take him to this eye, ear, and nose clinic in Newark. What they would do is they had like a spoon device, and they could actually pull his eyeball out onto his cheek to look behind his eye. Now, this is a little kid, 3, 4 years old, with no anesthesia. It's just, I'm going to just pluck out this eye and look at it. From that point on, my brother never could stand anybody in a white coat. You couldn't take him to the barber. I mean, he would go bananas I was, well, I don't know, 4th grade, 5th grade, somewhere in there, in grammar school at any rate, that I had befriended this fellow who lived on my way home. He was about 23 or so. He was, you're not allowed to say retarded, you have to say mentally handicapped. He had the intelligence of somebody my own age, so he related to me very well. One day I'm coming home from school and hey, how you doing today, Charlie? He goes, well, not very good. I go, why, what's the matter? He says, my brother died. I says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. He says, yeah, but he died a couple weeks ago and nobody told me. I said, how can people be so mean? It established me as like somebody who could relate to me in an adult way, which was very important to me at that time because I was struggling as a pre-teenager to figure out what my life was going to be. I wanted to be a painter, but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what an artist was.
This sketch does not portray Bill's avid enthusiasm for artistry. Well, at least they recognized then that I want to become an artist. Fame will come to him surely. Ha-ha.
Yeah, I was expelled 5 days for smoking in gym class. Kind of ridiculous, but I never participated in gym anyway. We were out hiding behind a building. There used to be 20 people on each softball team. So of course I was one of the last ones picked. I'd be on left field, out in the middle of nowhere. So I could just keep walking, and there was a sort of a field house out there. And I just walked behind a field house so I didn't have to walk back and forth between each inning. So it was assumed that I was smoking. My senior year, I had a 68 average, which means that I wouldn't graduate. Basically because I was not in their world. I was too independent. I didn't fit into the regular routines. Like I wanted to run for office in one of the class offices one time, but it turned out you had to be on the honor roll in order to be an officer. That's not American. You know, everybody should be entitled to run for office. You can't say that only rich people can, or only super intelligent people can run for office. It's supposed to be for everybody. They didn't buy that. Can't run for office unless you're on the honor roll. Well, I was below the honor roll. As I said, a couple points from graduating. So my last exam, I think, was an English exam. And everybody in my class knew that I was up against the wall. One last exam that I had to get, I guess, a 74 or something like that in order to average it out so that I could actually graduate, average out my marks. So I got everybody in the class helped me cheat. So I cheated through. I mean, everybody around me gave me the answers on the exam just so I could get. I wound up with I got like a 75 or something like that on the final exam, and I managed to graduate, which allowed me to go to art school, which is the only damn thing I wanted to do in my life anyway. The art school was a very good art school because it brought in a lot of professionals from New York, professional artists, painters, sculptors, people in the advertising business, Madison Avenue. So it was, because it's only a 15-minute bus ride or train ride from Manhattan, where most of them lived. And so consequently, I studied with some of the best artists of the time.
We met at art school, 1959, and this was a very peculiar art school. It was a real grassroots Newark, New Jersey art school. It was kind of salt of the earth place. However, at that time, it attracted some great teachers. So we had some fabulous people that we were exposed to that were very inspirational, and I would say to this day were great mentors.
I started out working in the illustration department. I had an argument with a teacher there about how a woman's ass should look. And I walked out of his class. He had some funny ideas. And I didn't like the idea of having somebody tell me how to paint the human figure. So I then switched to fine arts or painting. And I've been doing it ever since.
So Bill and I hit it off pretty much, and I looked up to him as being sort of the pioneer of this kind of idea for art.
A couple friends of mine, we decided to start a fraternity. And we opened up originally it was going to be just a clubhouse in a storefront, and place to go drink beer. And we decided to, from that beginning, we decided, well, we got a store, why don't we run an art gallery? And consequently, that's what we managed to do, is to have an art gallery. We had shows every 2 weeks. And after school, in the afternoons, for a couple hours every day, the gallery was open, and we all took turns minding the store, so to speak. And we maintained that all the way through art school. After I was gone, I think it was still going strong. I've made a living with a paintbrush ever since. One form or another, designing or painting, working in different areas, from film studios, Broadway shows, TV commercials, ballet, off-Broadway. Had my own film studio in New York for a while. Actually made a living with a paintbrush, as I say, from the time I was very young. This just set me up with a professional attitude and professional skills for me to continue for the rest of my life. Moved up to Nantucket, another island. First there was Nassau, then there was Manhattan Island. Now I'm moving up to Nantucket Island. So my wife and I opened up a gallery of crafts, different artists. I still have a few remaining things: glass blowers, potters, weavers, painters. We sold the work, and I would go painting every day. I got myself connected with the gallery, the Main Street Gallery. It's owned by this gay guy who somehow or another hated me. Hated me because I sold too much work or something. Got pissed off because it's a big social thing there. Everybody is with big money hung out together. And I was also part of that scene. Being an artist, you know, you get invited to all these dinner parties and cocktail parties or whatever. But for some reason, he got pissed off at me and he wouldn't show my work anymore. Although he was handling me, he had it upstairs in the racks, but people still wanted to buy my paintings, and I keep sending them over there. That really made him mad because it interrupted his business, selling my paintings. He had to go upstairs and bring down the paintings, show it to the people. And he didn't like that, so he threw me out of the gallery because I was too successful. I belonged to the Artists Association of Nantucket. Became president of the association. During my tenure there, I managed to build and start a little art school that was connected with the association. Had classes, figure drawing, pottery, just a little ceramic studio we built, printmaking, all kind, drawing, painting. It was pretty nice, especially for the winter time when there was not much going on there. It was good for the local people to have some place to go enjoy themselves. Sold a lot of paintings to the Artists Association, so I did very well there. Lived there for 7 years.
So I hadn't seen him in 7 years, so we started immediately partying, and he wanted to show me Nantucket. So we were hopping from bar to bar. Now, I am no drinker, especially compared to Bill at that time, and he could drink anybody under the table. So we went to every bar, talking to all his old friends and all these great dames that were sort of stranded there because it's kind of winter time now, right? So these are all the steadies. So anyhow, we'd end up at his house after making the rounds of bars and bars with a bunch of girls. Just he and I with all these girls in the house. And so I was delighted, but I'm really drunk at this point. And so this girl, I don't know how I ended up with this girl, but she had the biggest bazooms you could imagine. And she's leaning over me with these bazooms, and last thing I remember, I put my hands up like this. Just at that moment, my hands are up here, and I get this feeling all over me of all this scotch I just drank. And I have to turn over, and I said, I'll be back. And I crawled out the front door on my hands and knees, literally crawled out. And I got outside, and the fresh air hit me, and I said, man, I'm in trouble. So I just said, I don't know where I am. I'm at Bill's house, never been there before, and I'm going to crawl away to prevent any more embarrassment, right? This is embarrassing. And I don't want this lady to find me with these gorgeous breasts looking for me. I couldn't bear to stare her in the eye. So I started crawling away, and I stayed to my right. So I just stay to my right, I'll be able to go back by just staying to my left. So I crawled under a bush. Somehow I went to sleep. I woke up, I don't know if it was 5 minutes or 5 hours. And I crawled back, stayed to my left. There was this doorway I assume I came out of. I went inside, nobody was in there. And I was so pie-eyed. I was cold from being outside in the snow, and it was Thanksgiving, and it was really cold. So I went for the nearest thing. I crawled under the rug. I crawled under the rug, and I'm sleeping there. I keep waking up now and then. All of a sudden, the door opens up. I see this Jeep through the door, this Jeep filled with all these women still with their fur coats on. And they say, oh, he's all right, here he is.
I realize after a while it gets boring when you live in paradise. The weather's perfect every day. This, you know, the sea is beautiful. It's crystal blue waters, green and blue. Everybody's relaxed and everything like that. Get up every day. I go out, do a little painting in the mornings. Bring my paintings to the straw market to sell. Go out partying all night long. But every day it was the same thing. And I realized, I don't know, this is not a life. I'm not living. I mean, it's enjoyable for a certain amount of time, but after a while, 6 months, a year goes by, and you're still doing the same thing every day. You get tired of it. So I got to do something else with my life. So consequently, I packed my bags, came back to New York. So I started my career in film. Started out as just a scenic artist, primarily with Woody Allen. I did a half dozen films with him.
I met Bill Armstrong when I went to work. He was a scenic artist, and I was a scenic artist assistant. And I had to mix texture and wash buckets and clean brushes and service him. And he was very demanding. Bill, I have to hug him. I'm crying. I'm so emotional.
It'll be better. I'll go inside.
No, you can stay here. I haven't thought about you in a long time.
You haven't thought about me in a long time.
I mean, I've been
since
thought about all these memories, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I really miss you.
Oh, dear. I miss hanging out with you.
Yeah, you made it fun. There was this big silk piece of fabric that we had to paint this image in. And, you know, if you touch silk with paint in the wrong place, you're doomed. And this was a large piece of silk, which was very expensive. So I'm sitting in the middle of the silk drop, and all day I'd been throwing things at Bill, and he's been throwing them back at me, you know, whenever no one's looking. And we've been hitting each other. So I'm sitting in the middle of this silk expensive drop with a paintbrush loaded in my hand. And he's over there in the corner, and all of a sudden I see this arm movement, and I look up like this, and I see him, and he had just thrown a penny, and the penny went zoink, and it hit my eye and went right in my glasses. And it was standing up like this little penny, and we both started cracking up. And I said, you know, if this wasn't so funny, I think I'd be punching you because it hit my eye, you know.
We're at 30th and Park. I worked on this street for several years with Rennie Meacham, which was called Rennie Meacham Studios. And we used to do all the credits for the soap operas here. We did the flip cards for game shows. We did a lot of different things for candid camera, smile face. We had to do those all the time in different variations as supers. I set type, cold type, as it was called at that time, which is using a California job case, and actually setting type line by line and printing it. And that's how we put it together. Most of the cards for 11 by 14 cards for TV. Die Hard 3. I worked on that film. Did a major mural of one of Roth's sketches. We scaled it off in, I think, 4-foot segments, and was one whole wall, which was going to be over the background for a brick wall background for where the plot is going into the ground and to rob the bank, the gold from the Federal Reserve Bank across the street through a subway station. But at any rate, this mural was 180 feet long and almost 9 stories high by the time we got finished with it, which is a lot of paint. I had a half dozen people working for me on that project. I stood across the street in one of the banks, Chase Manhattan Bank, I think it is, and with walkie-talkies directing people, because you're on a scaffold which is only a couple feet wide. You're painting with brushes that are 8 inches wide, rollers, 10-inch rollers. You can't see what you're doing. You have to walk through everything, and so you can only see it from when you're a distance away, and I was like a block away that I could see the overall picture. It still was very difficult to see because of the scaffolding when it was in the way and everything, but we winged it and did a fantastic job on it. I was working on one film outside of the Plaza Hotel, and somebody had accidentally turned on a fire hydrant and thinking it was a wet down, because very often they would make wet downs on films to make reflections in the street, and it wasn't supposed to be. And so they come to me, quick, we want you to paint the cement, or the street is all wet, we want you to paint it to look dry. I went, oh Jesus. I mean, this is one of the impossible things that they ask you to do. And I was taken aback. I said, you gotta be kidding. How do you paint something dry, to look dry? I can make it to look wet, paint it to look wet, but I can't paint it to look dry. And they said they didn't care. We had to do it. And I wound up painting 4 by 8 foot sheets of Upson board to look like the pavement that was there. And then we laid that down and then drove the limo over it so that all the water, you didn't see any of the moisture on the street because it was actually on Upson board. Those are things that you never realize that go on in a film.
I met Bill, I guess a long time ago. Maybe it was She-Devil or Quick Change. It was some movie where we really didn't have a lot to say to each other because we were always on separate projects. But then the next movie that I actually had direct dealings with him was Scent of a Woman, and he was camera scenic on that one. And it was kind of a funny film because here we were working with Al Pacino, who we thought who is very talented and a great actor, but he was doing so many things at that time at once, so he actually needed cue cards to read his lines. And I guess that's kind of funny because that's the one where he won the Academy Award for Best Actor on that film.
Working on Godfather 3 was first time I worked with Coppola, and he was another one of those true to life characters. He only wore 2 suits, and I think it was always the same tie. His tie, you could have had a banquet on it. He had so much food on his tie. He was a rather robust guy anyway, and he had the greasiest looking tie that I ever seen in my life, and he had 2. They weren't seersucker. They were like poplin suits. One was beige, and the other one was gray, I think. And the only 2 suits he ever wore. He wore a suit every day, but it was like the same 2 suits. And one of the scenes that we're doing, well, we did one scene was the opera house. We had the whole opera house built and everything else, and it was just the steps going up to the opera house. And as they're shooting, they realized that there was what do they call it? Not a billboard, but what the show is going to be. You know, like present today. Marquee? No, not the marquee, but next to the doors, they usually have like a sign with what's playing, like a movie poster, but it's a poster of sorts, but it's very formal with everybody's names, and you know what part they play, who's the director, who's the lighting, or whatever, and who's the stars. But they didn't have that, and they're ready to shoot. And I go, oh, we need this lettering job, you know. They gave us like an hour to letter this. It was like, and then yelling at us, why can't you go faster? I mean, it was like this incredible big job to do, you know. And then I had to have a finish on it, you know, but it had to be urethane on top of that, you know, in no time at all. It was like you're supposed to create magic. They're used to you creating magic. I mean, it's like painting the shadow out of something. I had to do that many times. Oh, there's a shadow on the wall. Can you get rid of that? Yeah, I can get rid of that. Paint it out. Because we can't move the camera, you know, or something like that. Those are the kind of, and you do it often enough, and they think you could do anything in any amount of time. And it doesn't always work that way. I mean, sometimes it's impossible.
I started to get to know Bill a lot better on down in Savannah. When we both went down there and worked on Legend of Bagger Vans. And that's when we both fell in love with Savannah and wanted to have buy property down there, and he stayed and he never came back to New York, which was nice. I mean, you know, he found his niche and he found his appreciation as an artist, because now he doesn't have to work as a scenic artist anymore. He could work as a fine artist, which has always been his first love.
Painting has always been an escape for me. It's been a mechanism of getting away from reality. But I create something now that's my view of the world. That's all I want to do, is to teach people to see what I see. I want to show them how beautiful the world is that we live in. And try to teach them to see it the way I see it. The colors of nature, the structure of nature. That's why most of the things I do is water and trees, I guess. Water is, to me, even as a child, was an escape again. It's a fantasy world of pirates and lost treasures. It's a way of getting to faraway places, worlds that were outside of my immediate world. And that has an awful lot to do with being a kid being brought up in an urban environment. You're surrounded by buildings and dirt, macadam, and cement, and you don't really
feel that there's freedom in any way. I used to bicycle for miles up into South Orange Mountain Reservation, only because they had a stream there. A couple of my friends and myself, we used to go up there just to visit the water, the stream. It was only a little brook about 3 feet across, but it was the closest I could get to that. And I used to dream about the water going there. I knew that the water from this little stream would take you to the ocean eventually. The ocean represented a world of make-believe, a world of escape, a world beyond the reaches of society as I knew it. A society which was left me as I am today, as an orphan, in a sense, that I didn't fit into the rest of the world, and that I was ignored, and it was a way of dreaming my way into romantic places. So it's like I always had a dream of going to, when I was little, to go to a tropical island, which is why I went to and lived in Nassau for a while. I was old enough to fulfill that dream. Living on Nantucket was the continuation of that same kind of thinking. That's why I disliked the Southwest so much, because there was no water, and the water that was there was owned by the Native Americans. I mean, you practically had to get permission from them to water your grass if you had any grass. Most people didn't, they just had sand. So consequently, it's been a very important aspect of my whole painting career up until this day. And moving down here to Savannah, I wound up a few minutes away to the ocean again, surrounded by marshes, and inlets, and wildlife, things that I love. And I have friends who have boats. I don't have my own boat yet, but I have friends who do have boats, and one form of another, power boats, sailboats, things like that, which allows me to experience the water and the light, the wind, and all the things that I paint now. And that's what I love. That's probably why my work has gone in the direction that it has.